Hello and welcome to another episode of Prepper Talk Radio. It is radio for the radio-minded. This is your podcast for preparedness with Scott and Shane, and Paris is out again. We apologize. He is not in a concentration camp. He is on a business trip. He is safe from FEMA and apparently safe from YouTube jail as well.
But he's not terribly safe because he's in California.
He's in California. So,
and I was going to ask you. Sorry, Scott. I'll let you continue with your introduction. Then I'll start asking questions.
Well, as a reminder, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Survival Frog. It is tasty. It is delicious. I'm not talking about frog. I'm talking about shelf-stable, 25-year shelf life, fully cooked meats. And you just crack open your can and you are delightfully enjoying the apocalypse. So head on over to survivalfrog.com, get yourself a case of survival meats, use the code PrepperTalk10, all one word, and it's the number 10, not spelled out. PrepperTalk10, and you're going to save 10% on every order there, every product on their site. It's a great deal. Check them out. And with that, I'm going to introduce our guest. For you guys watching on YouTube, you see there's a third face. So you're like, who's this? If you go back to the archive, when our K-Talk days, we had Suzanne on quite a few times. Guys, this is Suzanne Sherman, and I'm going to give a quick bio. We met like 9 years ago at PrepperCon, became fast friends. She is one of our go-tos for understanding constitutional law. She's written a book, actually a number of books, a book on federalism, another book on the Lost Frontier Handbook, and then 3 book series called the Red Hot Chili Prepper Survival Series. Not to mention, she's always packing. That's one of the things I love about her. And she's got 2 podcasts, the Wasatch Report and Red Hot Chili Prepper. Suzanne, thank you for being on today. It's been too long. Welcome back.
Thank you. I was just going to say it's been way too long. I love the PrepperCon days and going over to K-Talk and hanging out. And it's really good to reconnect with you guys. And we're not going to wait so long next time.
I know. Absolutely. We're going to make this more frequent, more regular.
Yes.
Lean on your wisdom, your experience. Now, you are former attorney, or are you still practicing attorney?
I like to say recovering attorney.
Recovering attorney.
I used to practice in California, and I still lean on it. People seem to think that being an attorney gives you more credence for whatever reason when talking about news and current events. But what I tell people is it's actually the opposite. A lot of attorneys have been educated with regards to the Constitution, for instance, to go in the exact opposite way in which it was historically intended when the Constitution was ratified. One quick example, I'm not going to digress too far down this breadcrumb trail, is, the 10th Amendment, where we talk about the powers of the states that they never delegated to the general government. When a power was never delegated originally, and as isn't mentioned in Article 1, Section 8, that power remains with the states. Well, how is that possibly relevant today? Oh, I don't know. Look at issues such as abortion. Look at issues such as firearms regulations. Here's one that always gets people scratching their heads: immigration. When people say, the federal government has an obligation to secure the borders, I just politely say, oh, where does it say that in the Constitution? And another friend of mine the other day had said, well, the Constitution said that only U.S. citizens can vote. And I don't argue. I just say, oh, can you just show me where that is? Because I must have missed it. So there's a lot of deference to the power and acquiescence to power grabs that come from the federal, or what I like to say, general government, because people, including all the way up through the law school industry, have been educated to believe that is the case. And I actually have a chapter in my book, Federalism: How Decentralization Can Save America. Aspiring lawyers sitting for the bar exam, we have to take a multiple choice test. And we're taught in bar review, if 2 of the answers out of 4, if one option is the 14th Amendment and the other is the 10th Amendment, always go with the 14th Amendment. That is always the correct answer. Well, it's correct insofar as you want to pass the bar exam, but historically, and from an originalist perspective, it is an originalist for the English speaker perspective, it is the wrong answer. So to pass the bar exam, you have to get the Constitution's history wrong.
Wrong. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, so as you can see, Suzanne is smarter than both of us, if not all three hosts here. And so that's why we want to have you on more regularly. Also, I also wanted to comment, so you being a recovering attorney, you're also a recovering Californian, like Paris
Yeah.
is how we refer to him as well.
Expats.
There we go. Yes, absolutely. So I was hoping he would be here as well, but also, kind of leaning on that history, that past as well. And also to mention that today we are recording this the day after the election day, right? You're going to see this. Well, this will post next week on Tuesday. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah.
Well, this will post the following Tuesday. So maybe we talk a little bit about how, because obviously Donald Trump is supposedly elected. Now, I guess it's not 100% official at this moment. Still some ballots to be counted. But what's your view? What's your take? I guess real quickly, so we don't go too deep down this road on the election.
It's a done deal. I love to watch mixed martial arts, and one of the things I say is never leave it in the hands of the judges. And this did not happen. He not only won the Electoral College vote, he won the popular vote.
Mm-hmm.
It was decisive. There is no room for arguments. And it's interesting because in Harris's concession speech, I have to sit down and watch it again, as painful as it is. I'll take one for the team and just write down all the hypocrisy, just she's saying we are going to participate in a peaceful transition of power. That's what we do in elections. Well, these are the people that are screaming about our democracy, our precious democracy. Mm-hmm. Well, they know they have to say this because he won the popular vote. That, ladies and gentlemen, is democracy. But that's why we are not a democracy. Mm-hmm. But that really took the wind out of that sail.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what they try. I'm glad she did say this. I know she was disingenuous, but I think by saying that it will perhaps foreclose the possibility of any shenanigans that they might try to refuse to seat him. Interestingly enough, the vice president is the one who certifies the election results. There's a conflict of interest for you. So I honestly don't see there being shenanigans. People were talking about them invoking the 14th Amendment, which was enacted after the war.
Not certifying.
By saying that anybody that participated in an insurrection or rebellion can't participate in government, in the federal government. And that was just punitive after the war against Southern independence. So they wanted to keep it was in response to a lot of Southern generals being elected into the federal government. So they didn't want them to have a seat at the table. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think they're going to try maybe and impeach him again. Who knows what's going to happen? But apparently the Republicans have both houses, so we don't see that. Let's let him see what he can do without having to fight against hoaxes and false accusations for his entire administration.
I've also heard that potentially the charges can be dropped against him.
I forgot who it was, but somebody was saying in New York you really should drop these charges. I think there's some in Georgia as well. I mean, this was lawfare. This was what we in the legal industry call abuse of process. It is sanctionable by the governing bodies in the legal entities of those states, and it should be sanctioned accordingly. And I think Fani Willis and her boyfriend should be sanctioned. The ones in New York, all of this, I forgot that DA's name, but this was just insane. All of this should be dropped, I think, immediately at this point. Just for giggles, I'd like to see them take him into custody.
Absolutely. And I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, it's interesting. Like, as we've watched everything roll out, this, in my understanding, is the greatest comeback story, underdog story that I can think of in political history. No one has had this much dirt thrown at them, deserved or not, right? I've never seen anything to this level of added scrutiny, hypocrisy, just blatant disregard for fairness, disregard for the law, and just go after somebody. And he came back, and
Yeah,
here he is now.
100%. And they did this to themselves. I'm watching all of this unfold over the years, and I thought, this is going to backfire. You have communities from the forced immigration. This was social engineering to the detriment of these large cities. Look at what's happening in the state of New York. Look at the violence that's being imposed on these cities, particularly these urban cities. But you also see other cities, like they talked about Springfield, Ohio, that can't handle this influx. It's small towns. People are getting killed. Lake and Riley. We've seen these people that are suffering as a result. It affects everything. They're bringing people over, and I have a chapter in my book about the marginalization of the utilization of marginalized people for political purposes. And this is exactly what's happening. But again, it backfired. These people are miserable. I think the one thing that really got the people voting for Donald Trump was the economy. It's the economy, stupid. It's always the top priority. And the funny thing is, they're referring to the disaster as Bidenomics. And, you kind of think of a little kid that throws a rock in a window and then kind of hides behind the bushes, and the kids playing out in the street are the ones get blamed for it. Look at the spending increase during the Trump administration. You can say it was for COVID and come up with all these excuses, but the numbers don't lie. And that's what kicked off inflation. Now, did Biden and Harris make it worse? Absolutely so. But, the irony is this kicked off during the Trump administration.
Right.
And really, I think it's almost best that he did lose in 2020, because
then you forget about it.
Well, not only that, but you see how bad it gets. Look at the calamity in the cities. Look at the people that are struggling now as the inflation gets even worse. Look at the boys hurting women in boys' sports. Look at the transgenderism, the transgenders that are put up in the highest branches of our federal government for purposes other than their qualifications. This is DEI. Yeah, absolutely. And then they try to gaslight you and say, if you use the DEI term, you're a racist. Come on.
Yeah, it is so blatant and obvious to me. But the one thing I always try to look for and point out is I believe Shakespeare when he said, all the world's a stage. And I believe that's true for Trump as well. I don't know that I see everything properly. And that's why I want to talk with you more often as well, because I have a little bit more negative view. Not that Harris would have been, a better choice, not at all. But I really don't want to go there. But also wanted to ask you about, Scott knows exactly what I'm talking about here, and I'm trying to avoid, because I don't want to talk about these types of things because. First of all, because of YouTube, right? Because we get into misinformation, but also I think there's a lot of really sensitive people on this topic. Trump is a savior to a lot of people, and he's hopefully going to make a lot of difference, a lot of change. He did, like you said, increase the debt, and so did all the presidents before him as well. Back to Reagan and so forth. And I grew up with Reagan, and I held him up very high on a pedestal. And I believe he was one of the last true presidents, even though he was a puppet like everyone else. So I take this all with a little bit of grain of salt and some negativity, and focus more on what I can do for myself, my family, my immediate community, and so forth. I know your book's about decentralization. That's really, and I haven't read it, so I apologize, but is that mainly about, like you say, you're talking the 10th Amendment, the power back to the states? Is that really kind of what that's about?
Yeah, I decided what I did was I made a compilation of articles that I wrote primarily for the 10th Amendment Center. I think one was also for the Abbeville Institute, then some others. I don't remember the other ones, but I decided to put them all in a book and just separate it by, first of all, what should the qualifications be for somebody running for the highest office? and
Mhm.
why have we gotten to this point where people don't understand what the Constitution is, particularly the Supreme Court justices and the pundits that we see on TV. And that's when I get into the article, the chapter, the problem with lawyers and the Constitution.
Mhm.
And then I just break it down by different amendments under the Bill of Rights. The longest chapter is the Second Amendment, but I talk about the Fourth Amendment, the First. We talk about immigration and so on, and just get into articles that are really. I'm not, I might come across as the way this conversation started as being a MAGA conservative. I'm not. I have a lot of criticisms against Donald Trump, and I was very critical of him when he was on office. It cost me a lot of followers. I speak the truth. I have analysis from a position of detached fascination. Last night we had a show. We do this all the time on election nights. Call it electile dysfunction. And we talked about our criticisms also of Donald Trump, and pretty much we had a really good panel on there. We pretty much came to agreement, for those of us that voted, some did not at all, that none of us were really voting for Donald Trump. We were voting against the people that have been hateful, egregious, hypocrites, just scandalous with the name calling, calling us garbage. Kamala one day is saying that anybody saying Jesus is our Lord and Savior, you're not, you're at the wrong event. Yeah. And then all of a sudden she's going to church, and in her concession speech, this is another point I'm going to bring up, my highest loyalty is to God. No, it is not.
The question is which God, right?
Yeah.
Whom do you serve? Yeah.
To whom do you serve? So it was just, we try and analyze this by the facts and not being partisan. What we all came up with was we were voting against this party that used the government as a weapon against its political opponents. When Trump quipped to Hillary in the debates, you'd be in jail if I were in office. Yeah. They were apoplectic. You do not jail your political opponents. And look what they did.
Exactly.
Look at what they did.
Yeah.
He called them on their plans. And I'm not a Trump fan, and I'm definitely not a Harris fan. I'm fascinated, however, by the savior complex on both sides, right? Yep. And I wish I didn't have to say both sides, but we've been indoctrinated into this two-party system, and the rational thought seems to have left in most cases.
Absolutely.
To really identify, okay, I'm not voting for a person, I'm voting for systems, policies, and a group of people, right? Hopeful that they can together put in a better solution. And if they can't, I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that I'm protected, right? At the end of the day, I don't care who's in office. They don't have my back. And I don't care what office it's at. I experienced firsthand the complete sham of our legal system. But I back police officers until they're doing the wrong thing. I back firemen as long as, I back anyone who's doing the right thing. As soon as they stop doing the right thing, then I have to call into question their ethics. Then I have to call into question, what else did they really take?
Well, let's look back to
what they said. With our election, this most recent one, it was painful to watch the entire cycle.
Oh, yeah.
It was disgusting to watch the cycle. But like you, I was voting more against a completely corrupt system than anything else.
Well, let's look back to Trump's first 4 years. What happened to PrepperCon and preparedness in general? What was where did it go? Exactly. Obama was the best gun salesman. Trump was the absolute worst. And why is that? Because everyone, and I'm generalizing, obviously, said, okay, like you say, the savior complex. Trump's going to save us. We don't have to. And that was kind of with Obama, too. I don't have to pay my bills anymore. I'm going to get a free phone. Those types of things,
Those people were not preppers.
No, those people
they were parasites.
Yes, absolutely. But I think the same thing happened similar thing happened to the preppers when Trump was in office. They sat back, they kicked their heels up, they didn't prepare. A lot of preparedness companies went out of business because they had this warm, fuzzy feeling from from the administration that everything was going to be taken care of. And I think, and I hope that doesn't happen again, because I don't know that many people really got burned until the next administration. And so I'm hoping, and after seeing what happened today, you look at the stock market, the bond market, the things that happened today, up 1,300 points today in the Dow itself. And so there's a bit of euphoria out there that I'm very concerned about. How long it'll last, I mean, who knows? I don't think it can continue going up at the same rate. But I'm concerned that many the investors, the markets are saying, "Oh, we're all good now. We don't have to do anything anymore. We can sit back and be lazy again."
It's a great point you're making, because right after Trump was elected in 2016, the first show we did, and a good friend of mine, Mikhail Makaryev, was interviewed by Business Insider, and we did a show and said, you might think we're in for smooth sailing. Mm-hmm. Don't stop prepping. What was that fable? The grasshopper and the ant, and the ant was working diligently, and the grasshopper ended up with no food. Just because times seem like they're good for you right now, this is the time to take advantage of it. Don't stop prepping right now, ever. Yeah. And if you think that this is going to go on forever, the reason to prepare has nothing, preparing because of politics and government is very important, but there are other reasons as well. We've seen what's happening in North Carolina. We had 2 major hurricanes that went through that area. FEMA's useless. I've got friends out there making massive efforts. We saw what happened in Lahaina. It wasn't FEMA. Everybody's going, where's FEMA? The good citizens of the state of Hawaii were going over to Lahaina in their own boats with supplies. I mean, history is fraught with examples of why you can't rely on government for natural disasters, or rely on government to keep things running smoothly. In addition to natural disasters, social unrest. We live on the most dangerous continental landmass on the planet with regards to earthquakes, hurricanes, flood, wildfire, you name it, tornadoes. And beyond that, go even further. It could be just something on your street, wires down in a storm. You could get sick. You could lose your job. Maybe you just don't want to cook that night. And if you get my book, Food Preservation Strategies, you will have a well-stocked pantry, and you can grab anything you need out of there and make your family an amazing dinner.
Exactly my point, in that we are voting for leaders. I'll put air quotes around leaders, whereas we should be voting daily with our dollars, with our actions, by planting trees, by planting gardens. I'm voting for my own self-sufficiency and not putting that in the hands of someone else who ultimately is going to make the rich richer and poor poorer and eliminate the middle class. Because that's
absolutely,
I think, regardless of whoever's in the office, that's where trends are going, because the elite, the powerful, the wealthy are in control.
Look who got rich during 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the biggest upward transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class to the elite we have ever seen in the history of humankind. And one of the points that I make, in fact, I made it last night, and I referred to PrepperCon because Scott would have us. I moderated the celebrity author panel, and I would tell that audience, your survival, your family's safety and survival is your responsibility. The more you depend on government, and the greater the disaster, the greater your disappointment's going to be. Exponentially. Everybody can get sick. Everybody can lose their job. If you think that the government on a municipal level can take care of you, fine. But sometimes, even look at Palestine, Ohio. Look what happened there not long ago, maybe 2 years ago. Sometimes your local first responders are overwhelmed. Sometimes they can't physically get to you. There can be not only a first responder, you are the immediate responder. Have your training, know what to do. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, you're the primary responder, right?
I like that one.
And I hate responder. I think that's a after the fact
reactionary,
right? It's, oh, what do I do? No. You are the person in charge of your plan. And most people forget that prepping is about having a plan for when things go sideways, right? And building up fortifications. I love the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I studied psychology in part of my undergrad, and I got hooked on this thing. And it's like physiological needs is the bottom one. And people think, oh no, the top's the most important. And it's like, no. You make all of your decisions from the bottom up. Physiological needs, breathing.
The largest.
This goes back to the
largest
emergency
level.
rule of 3. I can survive 30 seconds without air or a minute without air before I start having brain damage, right? I can have permanent brain damage after a minute. Depends on the person, right? But it comes down to health and other things. But breathing, and then food, and then water, and then shelter, and then clothing, and then sleep. Well, not and then breathing, and then shelter, and then water, and then food. Those are like the baselines. If I don't have those, then my safety doesn't really matter. Once I have those, my safety matters, right? Then I start looking at health, employment, property, security, social ability. Then I can start going into love and belonging. But if I'm just trying to get food on the table, the frilly foo-foo feelings of love and enjoyment of other people like don't really matter because you're in a fight or flight mode. You're in survival mode. Prepping keeps you out of that mode. It gives you this healthy foundation. And that's what people forget. Like prepping is self-sufficiency or self-reliance of 80 years ago, 100 years ago. Like that's what we're leaning back towards. Those skills, that lifestyle. Not having to run to the corner store every time I run out of every time I need to make something. I'm like, oh, I need a cup of flour. I'm going to go to the neighbors. People don't talk to the neighbors anymore like they used to. Oh, I need to run to Costco and get 50 pounds of flour because I ran out. No, we live in a way as preparedness minded people, as ready minded individuals. We want to live in a way where we have a plan for things going sideways. We have a 90-day pantry to make sure we're not running to and fro whenever something is a little off. Oh no, I'm making cupcakes and I'm all out of stuff. Oh no, I don't have anything for dinner. Literally nothing for dinner. Like most of America. Most of America has less than a 3-meal supply in their home. That is scary. That to me is one of the most frightful things.
I like to use the example of, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. The same goes for preparedness. If you are prepared, and maybe it's not exactly comparable, but if you're prepared for an emergency and the emergency happens, but you're prepared, is there actually an emergency? No, I don't think so. But maybe what we should turn toward is, because you wrote a book about food preservation, about apocalypse recipes, and you had, I guess, in the past couple of years, you're still dealing with a personal emergency that maybe we can talk a little bit about. Maybe not an emergency, but I want to see how that affected your life being a prepper and having this, quite tragic event. And not, I guess it could have been a lot worse. It was just a home and belongings, right? That you lost.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of the things I tell people is have multiple places for your storage. So on my property, I had barns. I had a guest house, workshop, garage area, and then I had my primary dwelling, and everything was scattered throughout there. And it was Labor Day weekend of 22, and I had company at my house. Fortunately, because if we had not been home that weekend, I would have come home to having nothing been there, because I live in a very remote canyon, and the other families were gone as well. Essentially, there was an electrical fire in my motorhome caused by a defect with regards to the cruise control deceleration device. No warning, no recall. There was a massive recall. Mine was skipped. It affected about 15 million vehicles, and the engine we heard the whoop, and then it was just this massive fire. It was fully tanked up, full of propane. It was my vehicle to get out. It was my, bug out vehicle in the event of a wildfire. And I tell people, if you have a tornado or a flood, you can lose everything. And I lost so much lifetime supply of firewood, the motorhome, a horse trailer that we would have used for, just everything. Well, I managed to save my house because I took really good care of my property, and I would mow the field between the barn area, the chicken coop, and my home. Had I not done so, I would have lost the home. In fact, there was an amazing sheriff who was from our neighborhood who was standing there. He put garden hoses together by my greenhouse, dragged them over, and he and my son are trying to keep the grass wet.
Wow.
Eventually he gave up and he gave the evacuation order. While he was doing that, we were moving vehicles, getting everything out of the garage so we could get what we could out of there. Right as he gave the evacuation order, the water truck came down. So house was saved. So I lost all the stuff in my barn, all my gear bags, and what was in the other barn. It was the changing of the season, so I had it in the home. So I didn't get everything set up. I didn't have a place to store it. And then in Christmas, then I wrote a book about the incident, how to handle the situation. And one of the things my adjuster told me was, you are severely uninsured. And so I raised the amount of the insurance on my primary dwelling. Now that was all I had left. Still severely underinsured, because I thought premiums are going to be expensive now, and it's not like I'm going to have another fire. I mean, who has this twice, right? Well, 3 months later, I did. It was Christmas 2022. And my two sons and I were home. Their dad was in Mexico with his mom, who had cancer. So we were spread thin. My younger son was very sick with a life-threatening metabolic disorder, which is why we didn't go see her. So we were taking care of him. And he was stable enough for us to just get out of the house for a little bit while he rested. And something was telling me to get home. You just have that instinct. When you get that gut feeling and you get a message, you listen to it. Interestingly, I had that same message with the motorhome. We were working in it the day before to prepare it for safety inspection. It was going to in 2 days.
Oh.
And we were cleaning out the black water tank. It had already been flushed out, but I was putting Simple Green, just cleaning it out. They were going to rebuild that facility there. And I always park it by the house when I know I'm going to leave that morning. Whenever I know I'm going to leave in the morning, early in the morning, always park it by the house. I put it in reverse, and as I put it in gear to drive towards the house, a voice said very clearly, "Put it in the barn."
Mm-hmm.
I thought,
Wow.
Okay. That was just, it was not up for negotiation. Put it in reverse, put it in drive again, parked it in the barn. Had I not done that, my house, I could never have rebuilt. I would have lost the house and everything right there without ever adjusting it. As it is now, I'm able to make it work. But that same instinct told me, get home. And that's when I saw just little wisps of smoke in the canyon as I was coming around. And I was still traumatized. I'm dealing with PTSD. It was a very violent fire. And I thought, oh, my neighbor's home. Calm down. Nope, not the neighbor. Maybe they're having a campfire because it wasn't from their chimney or anything. Nope. Oh, it's on my property. Please be the chicken coop. The chicken coop was empty. I don't hate my chickens. I just, I wanted it there because it did have power to it. And then I just saw it was coming from the room where my son had a space heater, the older son, because the younger one couldn't handle any kind of heat whatsoever. So trying to just balance everybody's needs, right? Followed all the rules. There was no clutter around it. We had it away from the wall. It was one of the ones that looked like the fireplaces. It was a Duraflame, one of those, brand new. And I saw flames shoot out from the attic. I'm not going to get into all the details, how we all reunited. It was really traumatic. And it's just, I do get into that if you're interested on the Red Hot Chili Prepper podcast. There's one where I talk about what's called a ting device. And that is something that will tell you plug it into the wall, you have a service, TING fire.com. Had I had that, my house wouldn't have burned because we would have gotten a notification that this thing was arcing. So we did an episode about that. And after explaining this device and what it can do for you, this product, that's when I said what happened to us. So anyway, we came home. My son had said, yeah, it had malfunctioned. His room was really hot. And then his son also saw it. So the three of us with our separate stories shared what it sold. But the bottom line, how everything unfolded, I should say. And the bottom line is I lost the home. Not one wall was standing. And the biggest loss was, it was all stuff, but it was just 15 years of canning and freeze drying,
Mm.
preserving gear, equipment, firearms. Thank goodness we're somewhere else in a safe, in another building. I, had a couple at, in the house, obviously, but nothing that, was horrible. So it was a terrifying situation, but one of the things I had practiced before was trying to stay calm after that, trying to recover from the first one, and practicing stoicism and not being attached to earthly things. And as I'm sitting there watching the fire, I just kept telling myself it's just stuff. But there is so much guilt and shame that is a trauma response when some of this happens to you. My first thought was, I'm just disappearing. Nobody's going to ever hear from me again that isn't part of my immediate family. I'm giving up all of the stuff I do, and just kind of went off for a while and really had to dig deep and did a lot of research. I'm not one for one-on-one talk therapy. That doesn't really work for me. But I did a lot of research, watched a lot of podcasts on recovering from it. If anybody's trying to recover from a traumatic incident, I invite you to reach out to me, and I'll share with you, what I did and what I learned. And, the one thing that got me through this was gratitude and prayer. And when, we had to find a long-term situation for my younger son, because after the illness and being caught outside because he had to escape the house in just his pajama bottoms and t-shirt, he had frostbite on his feet. He was in a wheelchair, and he's autistic and had this disease. On top of that, he needed to go into long-term care for a while. So my home is gone. My son is gone. And it was just, you just wonder how you can get through one day. And it's just gratitude. Can I take a breath? Yeah, that breath felt good. That breath felt good. Yeah. And I'm going to take another one, and I'm really grateful I can do it, because a lot of people, as we know, have events like this or natural disasters. There are a lot of corpses rotting right now in West and North Carolina that probably might not ever be found. So,
that haven't been counted yet either.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, so it goes to show how quickly anyone's situation can change.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. None of us are impervious. We all, there are weaknesses in our armor. We don't know what they are until that weakness is tried.
Yeah.
Right. And so we do the best we can. That's what prepping is. We do the best we can, and we plan and we prepare, and then we learn to roll with it.
Yeah.
Right. Your story isn't just of, okay, I prep. Okay, I lost 15 years of all my prepping experience and knowledge and gear, but also the recovery emotionally, physically, spiritually, that kind of resilience most people aren't going to have unless they've suffered. Life is unfortunately about suffering.
Yeah.
And that's not the point of life. The point of life is, how can I find joy in any situation, suffering or not? Because, man, there are good times and there are bad. We're all going to go through it. And your story perfectly outlines full danger, trauma, everything else that can happen. I mean, losing your house is the quintessential holy crap of ownership, right?
Yeah.
Losing a loved one's the worst for me.
Yeah.
Like that's the
of course, yeah.
Yeah, at least it was, and I don't mean to say anything lightly, at least it was
stuff.
It was just stuff. Exactly. At least it was, I wouldn't say an easy lesson, but it could have been much worse. And so take it and run with it for what it is, and I shared an experience I had, nothing like this. Came across a wreck early one morning, was not expecting it at all. My mind was not in the right place. And like you said, with your second experience, you maybe had the opportunity to breathe and to think more clearly. And so I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to my next experience, but now my brain is in a little bit different situation, to where I hope that I can think more clearly when I'm asked to step up and be the first responder to a scene. And so, I absolutely use it as a learning experience. And with time, everything fades, right? And I've been through other traumatic experiences as well. And over time, and like you say, not talking one-on-one, but sharing that experience. As I traumatized a lot of people. I had a traumatic experience, and I shared that with a lot of friends, and I traumatized a lot of people just by sharing that experience. And over time, it's become, I guess, numbed. And like you said, this is really what life is about, is having those experiences, learning, and then moving forward and not being afraid of the next experience and being strong.
Yeah, I have some really good friends, not that know me in my personal in-person life, but some people that I do know, like from social media, that I have seen in person, that I consider great friends, that don't even know this happened. If you listen to my podcast and you really follow, you will. But for me, people say, I don't even know. It's like, yeah, I don't want to tell you that bummer story right now and bring this negativity into the real estate in your own mind. You got your own stuff going on as well. But, I want to tell people to, even if you're not religious, trust in the universe, trust in just goodness and evil, and just know that there are going to be signs there. First of all, I recognize the fact that I had that message, don't park the RV by my house. My cousin is Catholic and had given me some rosaries. I kept them. I had a log bed, and they were on my bedpost on my side of the bed there. When we went back to see that house, that bedpost was a charred piece of wood, completely black and charred. And don't you know, there were the rosaries sitting there undamaged, plastic. They should have melted. They were just fine. When I had to, one of the details I said I wouldn't get into, but I will because it's so powerful. And when I realized what had happened, it made me understand that we were being protected and it was going to be okay. But I had to drive backwards till I could get a signal when I saw the house was on fire. I didn't want to risk going down there and delay my son if he needed some help. So I'm driving backwards. As I'm going backwards, I can't see out my camera because of all the snow and the dirt on it. And my foot's floored. And I can't see, and I'm screaming. I don't know if it was out loud or just in my mind, stop, stop, stop it, till I ran into a ditch backwards. My car's at a 45-degree angle, and I've got to dig out now through the snow and then run to where I can get a signal. Well, that delay, when the firefighters got there, we get to the house, my son's heart medicine, his it's Christmas, is in the kitchen. And I go to one of the firefighters where we're standing. We live down in a canyon, and I'm standing at the top of the driveway with one. And I go, excuse me, my son's heart medicine is in the kitchen. Can I just, run down there? I see the fires in the back of the house. Can I just run in there in the kitchen and get his medicine and get out? And he looked at me. Under normal circumstances, I would know better. It's my son. It's his heart medicine, And he looks at me like I'm absolutely insane. And he goes, do you know what's going to happen if you open that door and let oxygen into that house right now? That entire attic is engulfed in flames. Yeah. That thing's going to blow up. I was prevented from going into that house because I would have. I wanted his medicine. And when I realized that, I thought, oh. But going back to what you said, Shane, about, being able to talk about it, and it does get better. One of the things I found, this guy, I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Huberman, but he had a really good podcast on recovering from trauma. And he's a neurobiologist at the Stanford University School of Medicine. It was a fascinating show. And he says, the way to overcome a traumatic event is to have something positive in your life linked back to it. Well, for us, it was getting my son healthy and also starting the process of rebuilding. And when it first happened, it got stuck right here. There are a lot of similarities between like the yoga philosophy and the human anatomy part, the throat chakra. I couldn't get it past. I couldn't get the words out. And they said over time, you can say it just becomes a sad story. And it's a sad story, but it's also a story now of overcoming adversity, going into your darkest days and your biggest fears, your biggest inconveniences and hassles and frustrations, and coming out of it a better person. It makes you more empathetic to other people, more understanding. Gee, but for the grace of God or my family, I could be homeless in the streets. Maybe we shouldn't, judge these people. And if somebody's not very kind to us on social media or in the grocery store, maybe they just suffered a loss or are dealing with something like this too. Just be a nicer,
Yeah.
a nicer person. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I sure appreciate you sharing that with us, Suzanne. I'm definitely going to re-watch this and listen to it and and try to also learn what you've shared and apply it to my own life, so that if and when something like that happens to me, I can think back, okay, what did Suzanne do? How did other people deal with this, and try and keep that clear head, because I'm the same as you. I have that same at times when I just can't speak,
Yeah.
and so I totally understand that. But yeah, thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I really
I'm
want
gonna
to
go back
drive
and
the
listen to your
point
other
home.
podcasts as
I
well.
want people to be, I want people to know that I can be a resource for this. And I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be I'm not trying to, I haven't made money off this. I have, like I said, the book on Amazon that tells you when disaster strikes, dealing with a fire and its aftermath. I explained so much in there that I never knew. Nobody wants to talk about having a fire. I was really lackadaisical in keeping up on my insurance policy. It was paid for. I didn't think about increasing costs.
Mhm.
You know, I'd never had to do this before. And, but I get into the importance of the insurance policies, the different types of policies you can have. What's going to happen when there's an investigation? You know, you call 911 asking for help in a situation like this, you are under investigation.
Mhm.
Yep.
Oh, and then when the second one came, you know, questions like, have you ever declared bankruptcy in your entire life? Now, as a former criminal defense attorney, I tell people never speak to law enforcement, ever.
Mhm.
You wait, you get a lawyer and you do it. But you have, when you're confronted with something like this, you need to tell them how it started so they can try and figure out what happened. You can't refuse to talk to your insurance adjusters and the investigators, or they're not going to pay out. So I get into how to do that. I also get into I have a blog also on my website, SuzanneCSherman.com, that tells you exactly what to go through to when you have to file a personal property loss claim. I have another one that tells you how to prepare before you have to process a claim. Fortunately for me, so much of my my canned goods, my frozen goods, at the freeze dried, all of that was documented, and we had a big videography library because of the Lost Frontier Handbook, because of everything I did for the Red Hot Chili Prepper page.
Awesome.
You know, I had photos of that. So they know when I say I've got 100 pounds of elk, they know I have 100 pounds of elk. And I tell you how to go through and make these personal property claims. I think that was the most overwhelming part of the fire, but I got probably 80% of the $200,000 I had
Awesome.
coverage because I did what I said to do. And that's free information. That's right there on my website. It's a blog.
Yeah, guys, head over to
That's great.
SuzanneCSherman.com. We'll have it linked on our website as well as in our group. For those of you guys who've been listening, if you want to hear more, we're going to have Suzanne on again soon.
Mm-hmm.
We love you. Our hearts are with you. You are such a fighter. That's one of my favorite things about you is you never back down from a challenge. This has been one of the most excruciating challenges probably of your life. And you're shining through it. And we thank you for taking time to be with us. I'm so glad that we had you on. I wish we could just keep going, but time is what time is, and we got to end the episode. But guys, stay tuned. We're going to have her on again. Check out SuzanneCSherman.com. Thank you, Suzanne, for being on with us. And everybody, make sure you take the time today to go through those resources on our website. Itemize what you have. Get everything listed out. Make sure you know what you have. Update your coverage. Be smart about it. Be wise. Use our system. Use our tools. That's why I created our food storage calculator at PepperTalkRadio.com. You can get it on our resources page because that is a way to categorize and log everything you have, right? It's another cool tool because it's not about preparing for the apocalypse or doomsday. It's about everyday life. All the what ifs, right? If we can eliminate the fears of the what ifs and have a plan, those disasters are less disastrous. They're speed bumps instead of gaping holes in our life that we can never climb out of. So thank you so much for being on. Everyone, thank you for being part of the show this week, listening. We love your feedback. You love your comments and your stories. Make sure you share those in our Facebook group, Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance. Thank you for being part of the podcast for the prepared. Keep that head on a swivel. Go celebrate your wins. Endure those trials with joy and gratitude. I guess more gratitude than anything else, right? Hard to be joyful in hard times, but at least find something to be grateful for.
Amen.
You've been listening to Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Suzanne. We'll see you guys next week.